Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to a first of two Film Ontario Q&A sessions with mayoral candidates. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cynthia Lynch, Managing Director of Film Ontario, and I'm happy to be sitting down today with mayoral candidate Jennifer Keesmaat to talk about issues related to the film and TV industry in the city. So just a couple notes about format. I have a list of questions. Some of you sent me questions in advance, and we'll start with those. We will also be taking questions live, so feel free to send them to @FilmOntario, which is the Twitter account you're watching right now. And we just ask that you keep your questions industry related for today. And with that, we're just going to dive right in. So welcome. Thank you for doing this. So just to start off, we'd just like to have you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about why you're running for mayor, and then the most important question that we want to know is, what are you binging right now, or what do you have saved on your PVR for when you're done campaigning?
Oh, that's fantastic. So my name is Jennifer Keesmaat, and I'm running for mayor in this city. I was born in Hamilton, and I then went away to university, and I, of course, met a boy. That boy was a Torontonian, and he said to me, I have a city, and his city was Toronto. And so we moved out to Vancouver for a few years and lived there. That was sort of our compromise because we knew we were going to come back and live in this city. And I moved back to Toronto with him over 25 years ago and instantly fell in love with this city. Knew that this was my city too. I got what he was talking about. And so we lived in a basement apartment in Etobicoke, and I took the Islington and Steeles bus up to York University, where I did my planning degree. And then I started a company in this city. I started a planning and design firm, which became a large national practice, and today employs over 600 people and has 4 offices across Canada in Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Toronto. And while I was there, busy building my company, which I started as a scrappy little startup in an old warehouse space that was perfect for a movie set. Everything about it was perfect for a movie set. Built that into a large company, and then I got a phone call from the City of Toronto, and I was asked to apply for the chief planner position, and I said, no thanks. I'm really busy right now, no thanks. And then they called me back, and they called me back again, and on the third call I went, hold on a minute. This is an amazing opportunity. And I just imagined pouring all of my energy into the City of Toronto, the city that I love. And so I made the leap from the private sector where I'd always been, became a public servant in the public sector, and had 5 amazing years as the city's chief planner, and loved working at the city and loved working with every neighborhood in this city. And one of the things that I also saw when I was chief planner was that there's a lot of missed opportunities in this city. You know, there's things that cities are doing the world over, and here we are with the most expensive housing in Canada. Here we are with the worst commute times in Canada. And so I'm running on a platform that's about bold ideas, it's about best practices, building the housing that we need so that we can continue to grow industry in our city, ensuring that we're embracing a program of continuously building out our transit network, which is essential to equity. It's essential to ensuring people can get from neighborhood to neighborhood without that crazy long commute. And then the third thing is public safety. We know that we've had a public safety crisis in this city, and that's something that we can address, and we can address it through leadership. So that's, in a very condensed version, that's a little bit about me and why I'm running for mayor.
And what are you watching?
Oh, what am I watching? The most important part.
Question, yeah.
So I'm watching all kinds of stuff, but this is going to put me into a very, very narrow demographic, I think. But I love the show called The Midwife, which is, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but all about little babies being born. But mostly I love it because of the way it's like a historic fiction that really talks about many of the pressing social issues, really from the Second World War until today. And it's through the eyes of these activist midwives. So it's very, very compelling storytelling, and it's very hopeful and optimistic, which is something that I think we all need a lot of in our lives right now.
Excellent. So you talk about your campaign of big ideas. So where does the film and TV industry fit into those big ideas you have for the city?
Well, we have this incredible story around film and television in our city. It's a phenomenal story, and it's the result of so much incredible leadership, like the work that you do, Cynthia, that has led to really an amazing North American success story where we are building and continue to build this incredibly amazing economy around production in this city. And that's something that can continue to grow. And part of my vision, and I think the opportunity that many Torontonians see, is that we continue to build a really livable city where we have the land that we need for the expansion of the film industry and the production of film in this city, but also where we can generate more value from the industry. And it's already a $1.8 billion industry, but imagine being able to better tell Canadian stories and generating more value around Canadian production and Canadian talent. I think that there's a whole next layer to what we can do in our city around film and production, and it's about expansion, it's about growth, and there's a very important role for mayor and other levels of government to play in delivering on that vision.
So I'm glad you mentioned growing, because we do want to see the industry grow, and I'm also very glad to hear you mention land and the importance of land. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Portland Planning Framework, which was passed last December.
Which I led as chief planner.
Excellent. And the important thing about that framework for the industry is that it ensures continued existence of employment lands down in the Portlands, which creates jobs for the industry. And as someone who lived in Etobicoke, you know that we have a cluster of filming activity up there. So how do you intend to protect those employment lands and to work with the industry to ensure that we continue to have more of those lands?
So this is a really critical question, because we can see in other cities, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but if you look at Vancouver sort of put a condo everywhere and ended up in pushing a lot of industry out of the city. And the risk, of course, to us is that we have to have a firm line and a clear vision of the role that the industry plays in the city to ensure we're protecting our employment lands. So I led the Municipal Comprehensive Review, which was about protecting our employment lands in the city and holding the line on the risk that we put a condo everywhere. And as a result, we start to push out the industries that are so essential to economic development, job growth, creating a stronger creative economy in our city. And so the Portland's plan, which I was thrilled to lead as the chief planner, was all about being absolutely clear that we have a long-term vision for film and television in our city, and that we have a long-term vision for production in our city. And that production, both supporting production and expanding and growing production, is going to continue to be the bedrock of the economy in our city. But there's another piece, which is moving forward. And we have a risk right now, and I've been hearing it from studio heads who've been saying, hey, look, if there was more production space in the city, we would have it filled in an instant. And in part, it's because of some of those productions like Netflix and others that are wanting studio space for a much longer period of time than movies traditionally do. So we have an opportunity to work collaboratively to ensure that we're identifying the lands that will, in fact, be the space where that long-term vision can unfold. So sort of what we've done today, I would say what we've done today is we've held the line, and with respect to the Portlands, we've identified space there for the long term, but we need to take that to the next level, and we need to ensure that we have a clear land strategy in this city that is specifically about the film and television and production industry in this city. So that's my vision, is that we actually take it to the next step and say, look, this is going to continue to be an essential way that we both build and draw on Canadian talent, and let's make sure that we don't get pushed out, but we've got the spaces that we need to make that reality happen.
And once you have those spaces or that land, are there things that you think as mayor or that the city should be doing to encourage the investment in that land? So great, we have the land, let's get shovels in the ground, let's convert. What do you see the city's role in sort of pushing that part of the plan forward?
So there's a few things, and let me just take it one step back, because I don't think we should take the fact that we have the land for granted. I think it's important to point out that I have proposed a plan for removing the eastern portion of the Gardiner Expressway, which does something really important. That unlocks 12 acres of land that we can use for retail, commercial, production, new neighborhoods. 12 acres of land is a significant asset, and it's right on our waterfront. And currently, of course, the plan is to take down the expressway and then to rebuild it, which also has an excruciatingly long construction period, which is not in the best interests of development in the Portland or in the western waterfront. So I think being really smart with our land as a resource right now today is what we must do. And that's why I'm very critical of Mr. Tory's plan of taking it down and rebuilding it. It'll be construction chaos. It's extremely expensive, to the tune of $500 million more than taking it down and building a grand boulevard. And it wastes 12 acres of land. So we need land. We shouldn't be wasting it on old 1950s style infrastructure. But in terms of the other supports that the industry needs, we know that the tax credits and ensuring that there's a very stable approach to the tax credits that support these essential and critical jobs in our industry, we know that they need to be stabilized, and that there's a really important role, since the city doesn't issue those tax credits, really essential role for the mayor to play in being an active advocate with the province. And, there's some turmoil potentially coming with the province. We need a mayor who has a clear line of sight and won't compromise in any way the importance of those tax credits to the City of Toronto, and also working as well with the federal government. So I think the very first thing is having a clear advocate that will not waver, will not be an advocate some days of the week, but not others. We need to have that advocacy and a very clearly articulated mandate around the film industry and the critical role that it continues to play in our city. The other is with respect to digital media and growing the workforce around digital media.
That was my next question.
Okay, I'll pause then.
So I was just going to say, once we have all this land, it's just as important in terms of building infrastructure in the city to have not just well-trained digital media professionals, but also well-trained crew across the city in front of the camera, behind the camera, and in our animation and special effects houses. So what role do you see the city playing to help the industry develop and build on that talent that we already have?
So I was about to launch into it. So now I'll launch into it. Maybe I preempted it a little bit. But developing the workforce and the opportunity for access to jobs around all of those different roles, some of which you see and a lot of which you don't see, being behind the camera, the editing, the animation. This is an area where there's a tremendous opportunity for expansion and growth. And the city can play a role in expanding the workforce. And of course, through the Economic Development and Culture Office at the City of Toronto, we need to elevate this as a priority in the city. Part of it is about building broader public understanding, both of the incredible number of jobs and the range of jobs that go into supporting this industry, that are not everyone kind of thinks of the film director or the actresses, the people on the screen, when in reality there's these rich creative jobs that are essential to making the entire film and production industry tick, that we need to be ensuring that we're supporting, we're talking about, we're advertising, we're creating partnerships with our universities to expand the training and access to those job opportunities. It's just, it's such a win for the city in terms of continuing to build out a forward-looking employment base and cultural resource and institution in our city.
So I'm glad to hear you also mention the Economic Development Office and associated with that, the Film Office. So as we all know, on Friday it was announced that we're losing our film commissioner who's going off to represent Canada as Consul General in LA, which is great, and we hope he'll continue to promote the industry there. But do you think that will change how the Film Office will run going forward, or have you given any thought to what additional things or different things maybe the Film Office could be doing?
So the film office, through the economic development and culture, is a really important link. It's a link between LA. It's a link between production and communities. There's often community impacts when you're filming in a neighborhood, and the film office can help inform residents and can mitigate some of the tensions that might result, and can also help to build the goodwill in neighborhoods where there's going to be impacts. But the film office also plays a really essential role in expediting the process to make sure that spaces are available, that permits are turned around very quickly. This is something that we can't be flippant about or careless about, because right now there's a whole machine that needs to be executed very clearly and with intention in order to really cut the red tape for ensuring production can happen and can happen in a clear way and in an easy way. When you're recruiting someone to come to town, you don't want to put up a bunch of roadblocks around parking permits. That's a problem. And so the film office has a really important role to play in ensuring that every part of the process is well executed. And of course, there's a risk. I was at City Hall when all the budgets got cut, and Economic Development and Culture's budget got cut too, and staff got cut. And I think we need to actually look at the incredible amount of economic development activity and job opportunity that is generated by the film office, and make sure that by film, and make sure the film office of the city is well resourced. We need to recognize that as an investment that generates a significant return for this city. And when we do that, we don't just kind of arbitrarily, as Mr. Torrey did, kind of cut the funding and cut staff.
Sorry, I'm just checking with Cass to see if we have any questions from the Twitter feed, or because I have plenty more.
Good.
So again, building on the work of the film office, how do you intend to keep the lines of communication open between the film office, the industry, and the political side of city government?
Well, having a committee as exists today, the Film Board Committee, that reports directly to City Council and works very closely with the film office, is an essential mechanism or tool. It was established by David Miller, and it has the support of administrative staff at the city, which is really essential. And ensuring that committee is well-resourced and can continue to lead the spotlight strategy at the city is absolutely essential. And the good work of the city staff in delivering that has been the backbone to the success so far. But ensuring that committee continues to be strengthened. Many committees were cut. That was one that hung on. My position is that it needs to be even strengthened, and the value that it adds to the city needs to be recognized.
And I feel like I should point out here that there's also a reserved seat on that committee for a Film Ontario representation. So we hope to see that continue.
There you go. Absolutely.
And you mentioned the Spotlight on Toronto plan.
Yes.
So one of the recommendations in that plan is to maintain access for filming in public right-of-ways.
Yes.
So we all know it's a busy city. There's lots going on, especially in the downtown core where 80% of filming activity takes place. So how will you reconcile some of your transportation priorities with ensuring that we do continue to have access for filming, and equally importantly, access for parking for the trailers and all the other things that support that filming activity?
This is a really important tension, potentially, if it's not addressed at the outset. And when I was chief planner, I led a planning process called TO Core that was all about how we're accommodating growth in the downtown and ensuring that in the downtown we're adding all of the infrastructure that we need to make the city livable all over the long term. And one of the things we specifically identified in that policy framework was the importance, as we move forward, of working collaboratively with the film industry to ensure that as the downtown gets busier, as we add more bike lanes, which are really challenging when you want to put trailers on the side of the street, it creates a real problem. We make sure that we're working together. And as we created our complete streets guidelines at the city, which were all about ensuring that we're using the streets for a whole variety, designing them for a whole variety of users, people who are walking, cyclists, and in many instances that does mean taking away parking, which is a really important tool for using the right-of-way for trailers and for moving things around for filming, we actually worked really closely with the film office precisely because there's impacts on the industry, and we want to make sure that they're not negative impacts. We want to make sure that they're positive. We want to make sure that we're planning as the city changes, that the interests of the industry are right at the front of those conversations, because no one wants to compromise the vitality of this incredibly vital industry. And the risk, of course, is that if the industry isn't at the table, the decisions that will be made that will have unintended consequences.
Right. Last chance for questions, because we are about, we're getting close on time. So was there anything else that, we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure that the industry knows about you and your plan for the city?
Sure. Well, I'll throw something out here, which we talked about a little bit off air, which is that I've touched the industry in a little tiny way because I produced a short film called Pedestrian Jar. That was, I co-produced it, and it was an official selection at TIFF, and it was, gave me an incredible appreciation for the magnitude and level of effort that goes into even the smallest little frame and all of the players that have to come together, whether it's lighting or makeup, the actors, all of the pieces that need to come together, the weather was a problem at times. And so I just, I just want to say that I really deeply appreciate the amount of heavy lifting that goes on in this industry to create art. To tell our stories, to celebrate our city and other cities. And I do think there's an amazing opportunity to really expand how we tell our Toronto stories and our Canadian stories in this city through our industry, that we can continue to expand and grow in such a way that that becomes a really big part of the value added of the industry in this city.
So I'm glad you mentioned TIFF, because this wasn't on my list, but you know that shutting down Festival Street for the first 4 days of TIFF can sometimes be controversial.
Yes.
Sometimes is maybe understating it. So how do you see that proceeding in the future?
Well, very similarly to my answer to the earlier question, which is that we always have to work together and ensure that we don't have unintended consequences. And I think that goes both ways. We don't want unintended traffic consequences or problems, and we also don't want to have unintended consequences in terms of not having the wonderful celebration, which we need in this city, of art and film and all of the players who are a part of the industry. So I think that's a really good example of how we need to work really closely together to ensure that our shared interests as a city are going to continue to be at the forefront as we grow and change and celebrate the artists in our city.
Great. Last call. Okay, so I want to thank you again for taking the time to do this today. Remind everyone that Election Day is 1 week from today, Monday, October 22nd. You can vote from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you haven't received a voter identification card, you can still vote. Go to myvotes.toronto.ca and that will tell you what to do. And come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. when we'll do this all over again with Mayor John Tory. So thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure.